Hello folks, welcome to Rational Science, directly from Frankfurt, Germany. It's 9 o'clock over here, 9 o'clock at night, whatever time it is at your place. Anyways, today we're going to be talking a little bit about knowledge, and even before that we're going to tie some loose ends from last week. We talked about philosophy, and there were some questions about that, so I want to cross some T's and dot some I's, or vice versa, maybe dot the T's and cross the I's. And we also have a couple of flat earthers who raised questions. They wanted to know how we curve water, especially without a container. And usually they don't wait for an answer, they never investigate, they never come back for an answer. But this time one of them did, and he had some further questions, so we're going to address that as well at the end of the show. Anyways, let's begin with our science critic. He made a video, 45-minute video, criticizing the scientific method. And he's entitled to do that. The question is whether he can defend his posture. And today he talked about, in what we're going to be analyzing today, he talked about time and GPS and whether any of that confirms, first, whether it's been verified and confirmed, and second, whether that has anything to do with physics, aside from the fact that, he might argue that it confirms general relativity, and again, does that have anything to do with physics? So let's move on with our science critic, and this is what he said. These are the issues, okay, and let me set that up for you here. Here it goes, listen carefully. The questions to be addressed in this rebuttal are: can it be said in physics that time flows? And does it make sense in physics to say that a mathematical concept such as time is dilated?
But the rest of those things all make sense to me, like time dilation, for example. It's a change in the flow of time depending on how fast you're going, or if you're in a gravitational well or something like that. And the thing is, time dilation has been measured. It's why GPS needs to account for it.
Okay, so the issue is, first, whether time flows. Can we say in physics that time flows? And does it make any sense to say that time dilates in physics, right? We're talking about physics here. And then finally, just another issue is whether GPS confirms that time dilates, and meaning that general relativity is more or less correct, or perfectly correct, and whether that has anything to do with physics. So what I want to do is begin with Mr. Brian Greene, and he's going to help us make our case today. Okay, so this is what Brian Greene said in one of his documentaries, Hollywood movies really, okay, and here it is. This is the first one, and he saw time first under Newton's eyes and as a flowing river, and then he mentions that when Einstein came around, he turned that into a frozen river, and that means that you could now more or less imagine yourself walking towards the future on this frozen river, okay, this frozen lake. Okay, then from there he moved on to this, which is the block universe. He treated time as a solid thing, meaning that we know the future, or the future has already happened, and essentially what you're doing is walking in the footsteps of what the programmer, the designer, the author designed for you. It's like, a cartoon character. You cannot deviate from, like Bugs Bunny, Bugs cannot work outside the script that was already done for him. And this is more or less what the relativists are saying. They're saying that your future's already been determined. All you're doing is walking on footsteps that are already there and that you cannot avoid. It's like the movie's already been done, and you're just a little cartoon character in that movie That's their notion when they talk about the block universe. The question, a lot of people raise is, what does that do to free will? Means that we don't have free will because someone already designed our future and we're just going through the motions. That's more or less the notion we have here. Okay, and from there, they get to this thing where they turn time into not a frozen river, because again, they go back to the flow. And because they want to show you that gravity is a warpage of what space-time form this grid, this canvas, this trampoline, and there are waves along this medium. So they turn it into a medium, this time thingy. And they want to explain with that why or what would happen if the sun were to disappear. Well, they say, gravity would not disappear automatically because it would take time for the gravity waves along space-time to reach all the way to Earth. That's the distance in light seconds that we are from the sun. We're 8 light minutes away from the sun. Okay? So if the sun were to disappear, God waves his magic wand, makes the sun disappear, the Earth would not instantaneously fly away. It would take some time for those gravity waves to reach the Earth, and then the Earth would not have any gravitational influence, would gradually or maybe instantaneously drift away. And this is how they picture it. Imagine, they do want to illustrate it for you so that you can imagine it, so that you can visualize what they are saying. Okay, here it is. Okay, so if the sun disappears, the gravitational disturbance that results will form a wave that travels across, right, the spatial fabric. So they turn time into this fabric in much the same way that a pebble dropped into a pond makes ripples that travel across the surface of the water. Now you see the Earth running away from the solar system simply because it has no gravitational influence, because the sun has disappeared. The sun is not weighing down, okay, the canvas anymore, and those waves take 8 minutes to reach us. Along what? Along space-time. In other words, what you have to understand from this is that they've turned time into a physical object. They're saying it's a medium of some kind, okay? That's essentially what they're saying. And the question is, does that make any sense in physics, to say that time is a physical object that flows and that can be dilated? Okay, so this is where we're having a problem, okay, with the physical interpretation. And so here is a rundown of those two notions. Is this time dilation what the definition says, which is the difference in the elapsed time as measured by 2 clocks? Or is it the physical interpretation, meaning why the Earth doesn't leave the solar system? Which of these notions is the real time dilation? And what they've done, they merged these two. When you ask them, what is time dilation, or you say, why does the Earth fly out of the solar system, they use the one on the bottom. They say, well, the Earth doesn't fly out of the solar system because time is warped. Okay, time is warped. And you say, well, that's irrational. And they bring all this time dilation stuff, all that thing, and you say, well, what do you mean by all that? Well, you're not supposed to take the analogy so literally. What we really mean is the difference in elapsed time as measured by 2 clocks. Well, these are two different notions of time dilation. One is used as a definition saying we take 2 measurements and they're different. And the other one says that, time prevents the Earth from flying out of the solar system. Okay, so we have these two notions, okay? And unless we can reconcile them somehow, all they're doing is covering all bases. They're saying time is both things, both a physical interpretation, because it's a physical object that prevents the Earth from flying out, and it's also, a measurement of some kind. And so it's like they're covering both bases. One of them is irrational, because it's to say that time is warped. And so they say, well, you're just taking the analogy too literally. No, the issue is that we need to explain why, what causes, what prevents, right, the Earth from flying out of the solar system. You have to explain that. And when they say time is warped is the explanation, Well, that's not a physical interpretation because time is not a physical entity. And so the notion that general relativity has out there is poppycock. It's nonsense. You can't sink your teeth into that. Now, if they want to use it as, a measurement of two measurements or whatever, comparison of measurements, that's irrelevant to physics, to science. We want to know why the Earth doesn't fly out of the solar system. And they haven't answered that question. General relativity does not have a theory, an explanation. General relativity has a description, a mathematical description, and nothing but. Okay? And regarding GPS, well, here you have the notion of GPS, okay? And they'll tell you that GPS works what? Because, they give you a cause, a mechanism, time dilates. Well, I don't know about that. And he says it has been measured and verified, okay? And so the question is, does GPS prove that time is a physical object? Does GPS prove that time can be warped, dilated, kicked around, etc.? I mean, what are we talking about? Are we talking about a measurement? Or are we talking about the fact that, time can be manipulated physically? And they give you an analogy, or they use these other notions or arguments against you. They say your computer wouldn't work if quantum were wrong. Just like GPS would not work if general relativity were wrong. These are the types of issues that they raise against you. And so again, does the fact that your computer works prove that a particle can be at two places at once? That's the question, because that's the theory, that's the explanation they give you. And the same thing with GPS. They're saying, the reason GPS works is time dilates. Well, what do you mean by that? Are you saying that time is a physical object that can be bent, stretched, or whatever? Time dilates. They use a physical term to refer to time. And they say, well, you didn't understand what time dilates means. And they go back to the definition rather than to the physical interpretation they just finished giving you. And this is where we have a problem, okay? So, we have a problem with this fellow's conclusion. He just takes it at face value, I guess on the basis of authority, and says, yeah, it's been proven that GPS works. The fact that GPS works, that's technology, has nothing to do with science. Science is about explaining, not about developing gadgets. And the fact that GPS works by trial and error, they figured out, in fact, they did a gravity probe 1 and A and gravity probe B, where they finally decided where they were going to put the satellites. They determined all that, by trial and error. They said, they took this thing and measured at different steps what the time dilation was, what the time difference was, and they got a value, and they say, okay, all we have to do is put it here, and we'll know how much difference there should be at that level. That's technology. It's got nothing to do with the explanation. You have to tell me why. What caused each clock to travel or to tick at the rate that it does? These atomic clocks. What makes them tick at this speed up there and down here at a different speed? What came in contact with the inside of the clock? That's what you got to explain. But to say that it does, that's just a description. You haven't explained anything. So you still don't understand why, what causes that to happen. All you know is that it does. And it does not count as science. It's the cause that, identifying the cause, the mechanism, is what is identified as science, as physics. Okay, all these people are doing is stamp collecting. And someone asked me along the same lines, okay, about an interview I had a little over a week ago. It says, you mentioned an interview last episode. Care to link it? Are we going to hear about that one day? Well, I don't think you'll ever hear about it because I haven't heard about it. Okay, just as simple as that. What happened was this fellow interviewed me, and he thought I essentially was going to come and confirm his version of science. Okay, that's essentially what it amounted to. And, when you interview someone, you believe, you think that they're going to listen to the guy that's going to propose his version of how he sees the world. That's not exactly what happened here. We started out more or less like that, but that's not how it ended. In fact, it ended quite terribly. And that's why he did not upload the video. That's why I don't have a copy of it. He didn't even talk to me anymore. I think he was upset, okay? And here's a rundown so that you know what happened on that day. That's all I can give you because there is no video, okay, that I can point to or anything like that. Okay, essentially he was trying to indoctrinate me instead of interview me, okay? He thought I thought like him, and so he was just kind of reinforce what he already believed, which also happened in other interviews with me. Okay, people think that I think like they do, and they find out that I don't. And so I told them up front what science was to me, that I was proposing a new version of science, new version of the scientific method that did away with everything we've done in the last 3,000 years, Greeks included. Okay. All of it is washed aside. I dump all that in the trash can. We've never done science on planet Earth. Okay, that's what this site says. You don't have to agree with me. We're not asking you to agree. We want you to listen, to understand, and reach your own conclusions. Okay? So I told them I had a new version of science. My version of science was rational explanations. Now, in that definition there, do you see any provision for math? And do you see any provisions for experiments? Now, he had no problem with the math part for whatever reason. He never really went into we never went into that in any depth. So he said, okay, he kind of liked that. But when we went into experiments, we got into a lot of trouble. There was a lot of crying, you know. We got into a little bit of interruptions and you know, exchange of words and so on. Not that we went off the rails, but we didn't see eye to eye, obviously. And so what was the issue with experiments? Again, in a nutshell, we also discussed the issue of knowledge that we're going to be dealing with today. And what was the issue with experiments? Well, I said, what experiment can you run? And this goes also for the flat earthers who insist on experiments. Electric universals also insist on experiments. You know, more than the establishment, actually. The establishment likes to do a lot of so-called theoretical physics. They do a lot of thought experiments, and a lot of these fringe groups, they don't like that. They say, no, we want an experiment to prove, to verify, to demonstrate, etc., etc. And I said, experiments have nothing to do with a scientific method or with science. And it blew his mind. He said, what do you mean? We need to verify. We need to prove. We need to know. That's how we got into the word knowledge. And I said, okay, what experiments do you propose to detect for invisible, intangible entities? What is an experiment? An experiment is see, touch. That's what an experiment is. See, touch. You go to the lab to see and to touch. But now we have all these invisible, intangible entities you cannot see, you cannot touch. What experiment does any of these fringe groups, right? Flat earthers, electric universals, even the establishment, what do they propose to detect that which you cannot see and that which you cannot touch? And that's where it comes down to a little bit of what we're going to be dealing with today, the fact that all these people say that an object is that which you can see, touch, and that which exists is that which you can see, touch. And we're saying none of that, all those definitions, those notions are irrational. An object is not that which you can see or touch. Existence is not that which you can see or touch, and that's where we run into trouble. And so I said, well, what experiment do you propose to detect something which you cannot see or touch? Also, by the way, ratified by the establishment at CERN and SLAC and Fermi Lab and all these accelerators. They say we can't see or touch what's in there. And so they go into concepts. It was mass, it was charge, it was energy. So they get into all they mediate all these transactions with abstract mathematical concepts. And people don't realize that. Basically, laymen, they think they're talking about things. They think that energy is a thing, mass is a thing, force is a thing. So when these people say, well, the particle of electromagnetism, you know, the photon or whatever, they say, okay, I understand, it's a little ball. That's what they're thinking of. And they don't realize that ball really represents a number. What they're doing is accelerating a number, and people don't catch that. Okay? So I said, so the establishment also is in accordance that there are invisible, intangible entities, or at least that there's something invisible or intangible in that region that they cannot account for, and they just go into concepts. That's what's happened. And so I'm saying, what if you have to detect one of these invisible, intangible entities? What experiment are you going to run? And he did not understand that at all, I guess, again, because he thinks a thing is that which you can see or touch. Existence is that which you can see or touch. They are synonyms, existence and objects and things. And so he had no answer, and at the same time, he kind of brushed it aside because it didn't click in his brain. He didn't know what I was saying. And so I continued with that line of reasoning. I said, how do you define science in such a way as to include, right, those phenomena we cannot see or touch? And because I said you can define science any way you want, but now if you're going to say that gravity and say magnetism, electricity, the workings of the atom, if those are part of physics, and physics is part of science, how do you define science in order to incorporate those phenomena? And he had no answer to that. He just went with what we have, and he just kept going back to knowledge, to truth, to verification, to experiments, and I couldn't get him out of that, and he just tried to impose that idea on me. He wasn't really interviewing me at that point. It was just kind of like a shouting match, more or less. We didn't get into shouting, but it's like we interrupted each other constantly, and he finally called it quits and never put the video up. So yeah, you won't find anything out there. I don't have a copy of it. He hasn't called me back. I think he was upset at me that I ruined his show. So that's all I can tell you. There's nothing there, okay? Later on, I went up there and found out some of his definitions. Went to his site. I hadn't gone to his site previously, but then I went to his site and found these definitions. And I realized then why we didn't see eye to eye, especially on the issue of knowledge that we're going to be dealing with today. I told him knowledge was belief, belief was knowledge, and lots of people have problems with that out there because they've been drilled in high school and college that knowledge is something different than belief, but they don't really know exactly what it is, but they say knowledge is different. And today we're going to be dealing with that, but you can see his definitions there, and they're not very good. In the case of belief, it's to accept something as true, where true is, again, a belief. And what is knowledge? Awareness of some fact, where fact is also an opinion, a belief. And so these are two words are synonyms, and people don't like me saying that, okay? Then obviously he said reality is that which exists, and the universe is all that exists. That's like saying God is everything. And again, those definitions are worthless. You can't use those in science. Again, fact and myth, you can see there again what someone says proven in the case of fact, and myth is what is a false belief. And they're all the same thing, because the way they really look at this is that, what I know. What you know is a belief. That's the way they look at it. Every person looks at everybody else in the universe, or at least here on planet Earth, and says, I know what I know, but what you believe, what you think you know. That's the way everybody looks at this. And you find out that he was a follower of Ayn Rand, and that also explains a lot, because Ayn Rand was not a philosopher. She had no clue about anything. Okay, I'm going to talk about her today. I'm going to try to destroy her in every possible way I can. Basically, those people who say or think that I'm saying the same thing that Ayn Rand said. And if they say that, it's because they don't understand what this site is about and what I've been saying all these years. Okay, no, I say absolutely nothing, even similar to Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand said everything that every so-called philosopher, traditional philosophers, said before she did. She didn't change anything whatsoever, nothing. And I'm saying something different than all of them. And until you understand that difference, well, then you're going to say the same thing. You're going to say, dude, you're saying the same thing as Ayn Rand. No, and so the first thing I want to mention here is that what I said the other day, that you got to get rid of all your heroes. I had to get rid of heroes, and if you look at the previous lecture, I talked about that. you got to get rid of some of these heroes. They're not heroes, okay? And I had to get rid of one hero, and that was Carl Sagan. He was an atheist, and I was an atheist at the time. He believed in that we would go to the stars, and I more or less agreed with him that I thought that we were going to colonize first the planets and move out of the solar system, conquer one star, maybe one star system, a planet somewhere, and from there move on to other stars, eventually conquer the galaxies, and eventually conquer the universe. You know, that's the train of thought. And so I pondered the issue of whether anyone had already come to Earth. You had von Däniken and his ideas that, you know, the pyramids were built by extraterrestrials and so on at the time. And so I was involved in that. I didn't believe in any of that, but, you know, that subject was very popular at the time. It's less popular, I think, today. And, you know, with Carl Sagan on the one side talking about, you know, going out there, then you give the possibility that maybe, you know, the ETs have already come down here or can come down here, you know, so you at least concede the possibility. And then you run into Fermi's paradox, which all of those of you who heard about it, you know, is that, you know, why haven't we seen any extraterrestrials here if you should imagine that there are some civilizations that are much more advanced than we are. So why aren't the Klingons here? That's the issue, you know. And so, yeah, I had to delete Carl Sagan as a hero of mine because of two reasons. But then Carl Sagan was not even a physicist. He believed in quantum mechanics and general relativity. I don't know if he was into string theory. I never researched that in his case because I canned him a long time ago. Carl Sagan was not a physicist. He was a religious fanatic, in other words, an atheist. And these people are more fanatic than religious folk. And he also believed we were going to the stars. And likewise, I can only urge you to abandon Ayn Rand. She was not a philosopher. She tried to do physics. She failed at that miserably. She didn't do physics at all. And she was also a religious fanatic. She was an atheist. Okay, and all she did was politics. All she did is recommend how people should behave and live. Okay, so that's my take on good old Ayn as some people call her, and Carl Sagan. So, and Ayn Rand was never a hero of mine, but, you know, I got rid of both of them. Yeah, I don't think they were physicists. They weren't philosophers. They were just, in the case of Ayn Rand, she was just a politician. That's the way I look at that. Anyways, let's move on with the subject matter today. I'm going to start where I left off the other day, and that's with philosophy. Okay, why? Because some people had some issues with philosophy. And one fellow raises this question. I'm going to start with his criticism or his counter definition for philosophy, which is more or less what people have out there. Okay, here it is. He said, philosophy is the search for truth. The best route to truth is the scientific method. Okay, so what is he saying? I mean, aside from the fact that he's talking about truth, I'm going to just skip over that. He's saying essentially philosophy is a branch of science. Okay, because he's saying it's a search for truth, and you get to that truth through the scientific method. So he's putting philosophy under science, under the scientific method. Then he continues, he says, science applies the data to philosophy for philosophical speculation. Again, he's putting philosophy under science. He's putting it as a branch of science. But then he goes in there and he puts something that puts philosophy between the sciences. Philosophy takes the results of various scientific investigations and systematizes them as a whole. Science is isolated from one another unless they are coordinated and unified by philosophy. Now he puts it as a middleman, as a go-between the sciences. And how does he conclude? He says, science is conceived from philosophy and is thus dependent on its theories to begin with. So he went full circle around. Now he puts science as a branch of science, of philosophy. And this ends up with what people understand as philosophy being the mother of sciences. Okay, so this is contradiction. They live with these contradictions. They don't realize what they're saying because they don't analyze what they're saying. And so, yeah, the punchline is the best one of all. This fellow goes up there and he says, philosophy cannot be defined precisely because the subject is so complex and so controversial. Different philosophers have different views of the nature, methods, and range of philosophy. So after defining philosophy and saying first that it's under science and ending up with it's over science, then he says, oh, by the way, you know, we can't really define philosophy very well, or better yet, at all. And that's where we are today. Okay, we are today at that point where nobody has ever defined the word philosophy. In fact, I mentioned the other day that the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, right? The only word you won't find defined in there is the word philosophy. And you would think it's the first word you're going to define if you're going to talk about that discipline, or you're going to make an encyclopedia of the discipline. And no, they haven't defined the word philosophy. You can look for it on your own. Okay, go to Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. You will not find the word philosophy. Okay, another visitor relating to Ayn Rand again also tries to defend her as a philosopher, which I'm going to attack today. Again, says the following: Ayn Rand developed a philosophy for living. There's no such monster as a philosophy of living or for living. No, what philosophy for living is just a recommendation saying you should live this way. That's not known as a philosopher. It's known as your next door neighbor. That's known as the government. They tell you how you should live, okay? So philosophy is not a way of thinking, which is the notion the common man has out there. You ask him, what is philosophy? Well, it's his philosophy. It's my philosophy. They're talking about a way of thinking. That's not philosophy. Because if that's philosophy, we have 8 billion philosophers on earth. And you cannot distinguish Aristotle from you or Ayn Rand from you. Okay, so you can't use that as a definition, as a notion of what philosophy is. You must take the trouble to sit down for a whole day and try to define the word philosophy. Then you can use the word consistently, scientifically, rationally. But if you just say it's a way of thinking, you haven't said anything. Okay, and so philosophy is also not a recommendation on how to live, none of that. That's known as politics. Politics is religion, not philosophy or physics. Okay, how do we define philosophy? Rational explanations of behaviors. And since science is rational explanations, philosophy is one of the branches, the other one being physics. And this visitor says, you are, whether you like it or not, a philosopher of science. No such monster as a philosopher of science, a philosopher of physics. That's nonsense. That was created by the mathematicians, the mathematical physicists. They talk in those terms, okay? Philosophy of science is not a branch of philosophy. We have science and we have physics and philosophy under them. That's the way it works, okay? So science is not a branch of philosophy, and philosophy is a branch of science, one of the 2 branches of science. And then this person continues, the branches of philosophy are, and says metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, aesthetics. No, philosophy branches are psychology, history, anthropology, sociology, animal behavior, and it continues. In other words, when you're talking about explaining behavior, then you're doing philosophy in any discipline that falls under science. Okay? That's what we say here, okay? And what do people say? Well, they say the following, okay? So I'll preempt you, okay? They say the following: I don't like your definition of philosophy, Bill. Okay, why don't you like my definition? I thought it was a pretty definition. You tell me you don't like it. And so people raise some of these arguments. They say, it's not the one I learned in college. Well, that's a fallacy of authority. Or they say, it's your personal definition. No one voted for it. That's the fallacy of democracy. And someone might say, well, the etymology, where does it come from? Philosophy comes from the Greek love of wisdom. And they say the world uses different notion of philosophy than you. We've used this for hundreds of years. Well, that's the fallacy of tradition. You can't use any of these arguments to defend yourself. What you need to come up with is a definition. I came up with a definition. Philosophy, rational explanations of behaviors. You don't like it? Come up with a better mousetrap. Defend your mousetrap. Get in the ring and defend it. You can't use the fallacy of authority, democracy, or tradition to defend your notion of what it is, what philosophy is. Now, if you go in there, you find this. You find the definition that you find in the Wikipedia and other places. And they say philosophy, the study of fundamental nature of what? Knowledge. So philosophy deals with knowledge, right? In fact, love of knowledge, right? Reality and existence. But it turns out that existence and reality are synonyms together with actuality and being. So what have we learned? You're just using synonyms. And knowledge is belief. Is that what philosophy studies? Belief? Okay. And so we'll get to that in a minute to show that knowledge is belief. But if I am able to make my case, then yeah, philosophy is not the study of knowledge, reality, or existence. It has nothing to do with any of that. In fact, reality, existence belong exclusively to physics. It is physics that deals with what exists out there and how it behaves from a mechanistic point of view. Okay. And then another definition there you'll find is this one from the Wikipedia. The first one was from another site. This one says from Wikipedia, the study. Again, study. We don't study in science because anybody can study and not know, get a 0 on the test. So we don't use the word study to define any discipline. It says of general and fundamental questions such as what? Existence, reason, knowledge, values, mind, and language. Okay, they put a few more. But again, they have existence and knowledge in there. And what is existence? Well, it's again from the Wikipedia, okay? The ability of an entity to interact with reality. But it turns out that reality is a synonym of existence. All they did was put in a synonym to define existence. What is a synonym? It's a circular definition or no definition at all. It refers to the ontological property of being, whatever that is. Okay, let's find out what it is. Ontology, it's a branch of philosophy that studies what? Existence. Being, becoming, and reality, all which are synonyms. We haven't learned a single thing so far from all these people. Okay, and now what is interesting about this is that when you look up knowledge, okay, it turns out that they don't use as synonyms, like when you go to the thesaurus, they don't put synonym of knowledge as belief, which they should. No one put belief as a synonym, but it turns out when you look for the antonyms, they put unbelief. So that was funny, I thought. Let me get rid of this. Give me a second here. Here we go. So knowledge, they don't put belief as a synonym, but they put unbelief as an antonym. So you figure out. Okay, so here we have a different definition, okay, and it's the one that I use, okay, and you see it there for philosophy, right? And you see how it falls within science. What is science? Rational explanations. It's divided in two parts. One is physics, the other one is philosophy. That's it. There's no other category. Physics deals with explanations of phenomena. It deals with causes and mechanisms. Philosophy deals with rational explanations of what? Behaviors. And it deals with reasons and purposes. Now you can have a definition you can take to the bank. Okay? And, I can defend those definitions because they're all related. They're all related to the definition of science as rational explanations. What is it that we want to know in physics, which is what we deal with in this channel? We want to understand how the universe works. We want to know specifically, no, we don't want to believe, we want to understand. We want to understand how gravity works. We want to understand why, in the case of philosophy, why someone did something, or why an animal behaved in a certain way. Those are the questions of science. People want to understand. It doesn't mean that you're going to believe, which is what mathematical physics harps upon. They want you to believe, and so they come and they try to prove to you with evidence so that they know, so that you know, meaning you believe. That's what it's all about. And we don't do that in science. Science has to be objective, meaning you explain a mechanism in the case of physics so that people understand what you're proposing as far as the mechanism. And we don't run experiments, like this fellow said, a science critic, because we can't run any experiment to detect invisible, intangible entities. We're done. That's it. So you have to define science in a way that you include those phenomena, the invisible, intangible ones. Okay? And so whatever you define science, whatever you define physics as, hopefully it includes an understanding of invisible, intangible phenomena, okay, or objects that mediate, the invisible, intangible objects that mediate phenomena we can't see or touch. We don't see the mechanism. Okay, that's the issue. Okay, another fellow comes here and he has this notion. He says the following, also again about Ayn Rand, says, the A is a thing. Rand is huge on this. Okay, A is A. Makes a lot of sense. You know, A is A. I love A is A. What is it called? The law, as they call it, the law of identity. Okay, it's her way of saying shoot the observer, in a way, in a sense, right? I don't know if that's what that is. Okay, this is what Ayn Rand actually says. Okay, regarding all this. Especially existence, because she got into the issue of existence. Whoever touches the word exist, the word entity, whether knowingly or not, has crossed the line into physics. They're not doing philosophy anymore. They're not doing ontology, epistemology, or metaphysics, any of that nonsense. There's no such monsters as those. No, when you touch the word exist, when you touch the word entity, meaning thing, meaning object, you've crossed the line into physics. Those words belong exclusively to physics, and we don't have 10 definitions for them. We have one. You don't like the definition? You got to get inside the ring with your definition. Sword and shield, defend it. Okay, we're going to try to smash whatever you come up there with. Okay, so what did Ayn Rand say? She said the primacy of existence, of reality, is the axiom that, what? Existence exists. Absolutely love that. You know, I call it word wizardry. That's what it is. You know, existence exists. Oh man, I need a beer to understand that one. That the universe exists. The universe? There's no such physical object as the universe. You should never put an article in front of the word universe. A universe, the universe, because there's no such monster in physics. I mean, you can do that in ordinary speech in the course of a debate, a discussion, but let's make sure that when we go back, we get rid of that article. Articles can only be placed in front of objects. The only things that can serve as nouns in physics are things. Objects, things. Then you can put an article in front. You can't say the energy. You cannot say a force. Those are not physical objects. An orbit, you can't use any of those. You can't talk like that in physics. Now, we do that anyways in the course of discussion, no problem. But as long as we understand that you cannot use those as physical objects, and that's part of the problem with the language, okay? So, existence exists, that's an irrational, it's just word wizardry. Universe exists, well, that's irrational. You cannot say that the universe exists, okay? Not in physics, not in science. You can do that in ordinary speech and religion, fine. Not in physics, not in science. Why? Because the universe is a concept. Okay, so this word universe is a concept, and concepts don't exist. You cannot say that a concept exists, not in physics, not in science. You can do that in ordinary speech. You can say love exists, intelligence exists, fine, but you can't do that in physics. In physics, only objects may be said to exist. That follows from the definition of the word exist. Okay? And we'll get in there. You have the definition. Existence, what is it? Physical presence. What is physical referred to? A thing, an object, an entity, a body, a substance, whatever you want to call it. All those are synonyms. Presence, that's location. It must have location. There has to be distance between that thing and my chest in order for it to meet the definition of exist. You can't do that with the word universe, because universe is matter and space. That's why universe is not a thing. Universe is a concept, okay? And yeah, a lot of people have problems with that. And then she continued, a thing is itself. A is A, right? Existence is identity. No, we have a problem with that. A serious problem. It's an irrational statement, what she just said. A thing is itself is nonsense. It's poppycock. That's law of identity. A equal A. That's for people who have to go to the mental asylum. Okay, it has no meaning whatsoever in physics to say that the ball is the ball. No kid. Yeah. I don't know what that could possibly mean. Existence is identity. Absolutely not. Because if identity is a thing, is itself, they're not finished. Existence is not identity. It's identity plus location. You need location for it to be existing. And that's what all these people missed, including Ayn Rand and everyone that came before her. And after, by the way. Okay? Things are what they are, an identity. And again, the universe is not the universe. I mean, whatever that means. The universe is not an object, not a thing. It's an unscientific statement. Existence can only apply to objects, and it cannot apply to concepts, okay? And if you want to use the word exist in a rational manner, it had better have an object, and that object had better have location. Okay, and so here's a more or less a summary of why Ayn Rand just chased her tail around and come up with anything, because she was trying to do physics, whether she knew it or not, and she ended up with nonsense. And what is the nonsense? The nonsense is that she said that the universe is beyond consciousness. In other words, you don't need consciousness for the universe to exist. That's the way she put it. And then everything she said after that included conscience, including see, touch, feeling, senses, meaning consciousness. So she contradicted herself. That's all she did in her reasoning. And here it is. I'm going to show you why she did a circular reasoning, okay? And why she did nothing different than Hume and Kant, for example, to folks that beat her to it. Okay? She starts out by saying the universe exists independent of consciousness. Well, we can't say the universe exists, but we understand what she's saying. She's saying like the matter out there, you know, every atom in the universe is out there independent of consciousness. Okay? No problem there. But this is not what she says in the rest of her dissertation. She says consciousness is the faculty of perceiving that which exists. She talks about perception now. She's going to introduce see and touch. Okay, she says first it's independent of consciousness, meaning of see and touch. Now she's going to talk about perception. She introduces see and touch back into her discussion. And now she says the most ridiculous thing ever, to exist is to be something. Absolutely not. This is the same thing that Hume said and the same thing that Kant said. And there's her own words, a thing is itself, existence is identity. If existence is a thing, meaning identity, meaning itself, we're missing the word location. That's what Hume and Kant missed, and that's what Ayn Rand missed. She did not figure out the word location. That's what's missing in the word exist. And then she said, something is this which one perceives. Absolutely not. You don't perceive the rope. You can't see or touch the mediators of gravity or of light or of magnetism. So this is not true. You cannot say that something exists which one perceives, aside from the fact that perception is a personal issue. You know, if I'm on drugs and I can't perceive because, you know, I'm floating out there, you know, what does that tell me about existence? Does that mean that the table exists for you because you can perceive it, you can touch it and see it, and, you know, I'm in left field with my mind and I can't see or touch it because, you know, I'm flying in cloud nine? Does that mean that the table doesn't exist? It's a question of perception of each individual. Is it subjective? what she called objectivism, and all she does is a subjectivism. Then she says existence and consciousness are axioms you cannot escape. Absolutely not. Existence has nothing to do whatsoever with consciousness, and that's what she said at the beginning, that it's independent of consciousness. And then she just rubs in more of that. She says something needs sight and or touch. Absolutely not. Awareness of entities, sight and touch. Absolutely not. Perceive things, entity. She talked about perception, about consciousness, about see, touch. And as long as she went into see, touch, she just went around in circles in her reasoning. So no, Ayn Rand never figured it out. First, because she was dealing with a subject matter she was not very familiar with, which was physics. She didn't realize that existence and entity belong to physics exclusively. So she was not doing philosophy. Philosophy of living, of life, or whatever it's called, recommendations on how to live, whatever you want to call it. None of that is physics, none of that is philosophy. That's just religion, just an opinion. Beliefs, that's a religion, okay? And some people say, well, Bill, what are you saying? You're saying that the universe is a concept, so we're living inside or within a concept? Is that what you're saying, Bill? And again, it's because people have, they don't have a very rational mind, so they don't know what the issues are. So let's make sure we answer that question, okay, for those who still have stumbling blocks, mental blocks to understand that issue. So let's go with that. Okay, universe is a concept, yes. Concept, a word that invokes or embodies two objects or two words treated as objects. So the fellow says, are you suggesting that we live inside a concept? We're living within a concept? And this is important also for the flat earthers who say, what do you mean? You can curve water without a container, so to speak. So it's like they're suggesting that, the universe is some kind of container, space is some kind of container. That's what they're insinuating. That's what they have in the backs of their minds. And so we have to go slowly for these people and say, universe, we define it as matter and space, okay? Matter and space. Matter is all the atoms out there, okay, in existence. They have distance with respect to each other. Each one has location. That's independent of consciousness, true, like Miss Ayn Rand said. And the other portion of the word universe is space. So what is space? Well, space is a synonym of nothing, and that is that which has no shape. An object is that which has shape. Space is that which does not have shape. If it doesn't have shape, it doesn't have a border. It doesn't have a surface. It doesn't have a perimeter. And so not even God can get out of that which doesn't have shape. There's no border to cross. Okay, so space is not a container. It's not a thing. Okay? And so the issue is the way you have to look at this is the atoms in your body form part of the matter that comprises the so-called universe. Universe is matter in space. Your atoms form part of the matter. It's not contained within any container. Okay, it's floating in nothingness. There is no such thing as space. There is no such thing as nothingness. And so you cannot escape nothingness. No atom can leave space because it would have nowhere to go because there's no place to cross. There is no border to cross. Not even God can escape space. Okay? And so to say that we inhabit or live within the universe is what the irrational statement is. Okay? So this is the way you're supposed to look at that under rational physics, rational science. Okay? Visitor says, continuing with this line of reasoning, okay, religion is mysticism. No, absolutely not. In fact, if you look up the word, well, you could say it is. Mysticism is belief. That's essentially how it's defined. But just want to clarify that religion has nothing to do with God. Okay, religion has to do with opinion and belief, and that's what mysticism is. And atheism is a religion. Okay? Why? Because, and I say it's the religion of the mathematicians. A person who is an atheist is a person who does not understand the scientific method, has never done science in their lives. That's what an atheist is. Why? Where's the problem? The problem is that an atheist says, I don't believe in the existence of God. The theist, they say, I believe in the existence of God. And the agnostic says, I don't know whether to believe in the existence of God or not, and something along those lines. All three of them are irrational statements, are irrational people. The way we do it in science, we say, let us assume that God exists. God can never be a theory, so you cannot say that you believe or don't believe in the theory of God's existence. God cannot be a theory. God can only be a thing. You can say God is a thing, okay? And that's if God has shape. Now, if God is a concept, you cannot even talk about existence. You cannot say God exists because God is intelligence or God is love. That's even worse. But if God is a thing, like a human, the guy with the magic wand that made the universe, fine, no problem. You start out on the right foot. Now you have an object. Now, in order for God to exist, I don't care if you believe or don't believe or are not sure, none of that has any bearing on the issue before us. The issue before us is, does God fit the definition of existence? For that, God has to be an object. Apparently he's an object if he's a human, right? So we've got an object, a thing, but now he's got to have location. He's got to have distance with respect to my chest. God can hide in the 20th dimension for all we care. There has to be a straight line of direction from God all the way to me. So he can hide anywhere he wants, I don't care. But if he exists, there's got to be a straight line of direction from God to me. And he cannot escape that, no matter what dimension he wishes to hide in. Okay? Person says, morality and politics are not religion. Yeah, they are. Morality is an opinion. Okay? I kill your brother. Is that moral or what? Is that, your opinion? Well, I think it is because, I think it was good and you think it was bad. I think it was moral. I had to kill him. Maybe he did something to me, and so I thought it was good to kill him, and you think it's bad to kill him. So what have we learned about morality? And, we've had homosexuality for centuries considered immoral. Now it's not. Now it's part of the mainstream. So the question is, what are we going to say? We have an opinion about it? Is that what it is? One that Ayn Rand used to use as altruism, is that moral or immoral? I mean, you can go on and on, just pick up any word and you'll find one person on one side of the issue and another one on the other side of the issue. We haven't learned anything. And politics obviously is religion, because politics is all opinion, how we should run the world. And someone says, well, there's a better way of running the world or more effective way of running the world than in another way. Okay, so you have the way of running it, we'll call it Form A and Form B. There's a way A of doing things, a way B of doing things. And the guy says, see, with the way A, we're more productive, we're more efficient, blah, 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 blah. And the other person might say, yeah, but look, people are more miserable and so on. He might raise some other issues. And so what have we learned? It's just an opinion. Again, what we look for in science is explanations and not opinions or recommendations of how to run the world or how you should behave or whatever. That's known, again, as your next door neighbor. He tells you how you should behave, or the government, any of those. Ayn Rand derived her views scientifically. Well, no such monster. How views are derived is irrelevant, first of all. I don't care if you had a bad dream or you did an experiment. You can derive your views any way you want. It's when you come to the conference you have to explain something, not how you came to your conclusions. I mean, if you want to put that as an interesting anecdote, that's great. But the meat of it is the explanation, not how you came to your conclusions. And then her views, that's an opinion. I don't care what her views are. We need an explanation. And again, all she did was, politics, recommendations on how to live, not philosophy. Philosophy, explanations. And again, we have to define the word philosophy in order to categorize her properly. And then the perceptual concretes of existence. Again, when you get into perception, you get into not objectivity, which is what she called her subjectivity. Yeah, perception is subjective. So why she says on the one hand that the universe exists outside of consciousness, and then she goes in there and says the only way to determine what exists out there is through see, touch, perception, consciousness. So she just went around in circles. That's all she did. And again, because she was not a philosopher, she was not a scientist, she was not a physicist, which is what she tried to do, whether she knew it or not. Okay, let's get to, well, I just want to, I guess before I get into knowledge, just want to summarize what this site is about, okay? And again, we're not asking you to believe, to share our knowledge, our beliefs. We're asking you to understand what this site is about, okay? And it takes a long time for people to understand what this site is about because we're very different than everybody else out there. We say absolutely nothing like anybody out there on the planet, okay? Here it is, rational science. We have a paradigm shift, major paradigm shift. We're breaking completely with the past. Anything below the year 2000 and backwards was nonsense. We never did science, we never did philosophy because we never defined those words. We never did physics, you know. And to this day, we have no definition from the establishment, okay, for physics or for philosophy. And no one from Aristotle to Ayn, right? None of those figured it out. Why? Because they had no definition. See, if they would have defined the terms, we could use them consistently and apply them. But since they never defined these words very precisely, very concisely, so that we can use them consistently, scientifically, rationally, because of that, they were not scientists, they were not philosophers, they were not physics. They're outside of all that, okay? All they did was politics, recommendations, and they say, this is how you should live, this is what you should do, you know, your next door neighbor. And all they ended up with today, and that's the proof, the evidence. You want proof, evidence, truth? Here you have it. What do we have today? We have irrational notions of how the universe works. What do we have? We have no definitions. We confuse physics with philosophy. We think that existence and entities belong to philosophy, ontology, epistemology, and all that stuff. No, those words belong exclusively to physics. And so people say, I'm a philosopher. Oh, why are you a philosopher? Oh, because I try to figure out what exists and what an entity is, what a thing is. In fact, those words are treated within the world of philosophy. And the people who should be treating with those words don't do it. And those are the physicists, so-called physicists, mathematical physicists. And they say, no, we do equations. That's all we do. And so, yeah, entities' existence, they don't belong to philosophy. And until you get a hang of that, you don't know what this site is about. So we've changed all that, and we don't care what the rest of the world says. We don't care if we're the only people on the planet who hold those views. This is not about tradition. It's not about democracy. It's not about authority. It's about defining words that no one has defined until today. And again, the issue there is that these words are up for grabs. No one has defined them, so you're welcome to define them today. If you go into the dictionary, go to the encyclopedias, you won't find rational definitions. You'll find all kinds of problems with them. Even the same philosophers, epistemologists, whatever they're called, the physicists, they'll tell you the same thing. Well, we don't have really a definition. We don't know what a point is. We don't know what a line is. They have no definitions for these. We don't know what time is. They don't know any of these words. They don't have a definition, but they use them. And when you ask them, well, what's the definition of this? It's go to the other side of campus, ask a librarian, ask a English major, and he'll tell you, you know. And you go to them and they say, well, go to the dictionary. We defined it there. And when you go in there, you find irrational definitions. That's all you find. Inconsistent definitions. And if you go, again, with the word philosophy to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, you won't even find the word. So whatever. These words are up for grabs. Anyone is welcome to define them now, because whatever you find in the dictionaries are not rational, are not defensible. Okay, and from philosophy, we lead into knowledge. What is knowledge? Well, we all think we know. We all think knowledge is different than belief. Today I'm going to argue exactly the opposite. I'm going to maintain what Plato maintained 2,500 years ago that knowledge is belief, and he couldn't tell the difference. In the end, after doing all his footwork, okay, he couldn't figure it out. Okay, so one person comes in here and says, you are unfortunately using Plato and his justified true belief crap. I love that. Okay, but yeah, Plato said knowledge is belief, but and I say the same thing. There's no difference between knowledge and belief. A lot of people don't like to hear me say that. Okay, I feel for you deep in my heart. So what you need to do is define knowledge, not tell me what it ain't. Tell me what it is. Okay? That's what you're tasked with. Okay, you got to tell me what knowledge is. And for this, let's make sure we at least cross the T and dot the I there, that we cover Mr. Plato, so that I mean he really covered the word knowledge quite well. Okay, he covered in this book. Okay, it's called the Theaetetus, and he says Socrates. He's got this discussion among Socrates and his students. A couple visitors that came in there, okay, and Socrates says, "What is knowledge?" And Theaetetus says, "He who knows perceives what he knows. Knowledge is perception." Perception, again, Ayn Rand, she talked about perception. Every one of these people talks about perception. See, touch, okay, see, touch, perception, senses. That's what they thought an object is all these years. That's what they identify existence with. So knowledge is very much related to the word existence, and the word entity, object, thing. Okay, we're going to see that constantly. These three words are constantly intertwined. Okay, so what does Socrates say? Well, he's got three arguments essentially. Those are not his exact words. I'm just going to put his conclusions. This is Plato speaking for Socrates, who by then had been forced to commit suicide. Okay, he was forced to drink hemlock for corrupting the youth and offending the gods of Greece. And so this is what Socrates says. He says, perception is inseparable from the perceiver. Yeah. Okay. Perception, perceiver, it's like they go together. Senses, see, touch, see, touch, see, touch. But he makes a good argument. He says there's a problem of memory. Why? Because when the perception is gone, right? You touch something, now a minute later you're no longer perceiving that thing, but you have it in memory. And so now you're not perceiving directly, but you have the memory of the perception. And as he says, if knowledge is perception, is the knowledge gone now that you no longer perceive, no longer see, touch, now you have it in your mind? Okay, that's the argument he raises. Okay, this is the train of thought. Okay. And then Plato, again, speaking for Socrates, says, other people may misperceive. Okay? In other words, someone may have the wrong perception. Again, he could be on drugs, he could be flying high, he could be out of his mind. And does that mean that we have to trust his perception? You know, so again, you got to keep all these things in mind, that these are the arguments that Plato raised. Okay, and so this is what Plato concludes, essentially. You know, he says, in that book, Theaetetus, says, knowledge, a true judgment with an account. That's essentially his conclusion, and that's translated today as justified true belief. What is knowledge? Belief. Ultimately, belief. Especially when justified and true are synonyms of belief. So justified is belief, true is belief, and belief is belief. So all he said is knowledge is belief, belief, belief. That's all he said. It's just a lot of belief. And he tried to put in there, you know, when you say justified true belief, you're kind of including something which is external. Like there's a truth out there, okay, and you have a belief. And the question is whether knowledge is that belief in that truth that is out there. But if that truth, we all have different truths, we all have different proofs in our head, we have different evidences for the same thing. You know, someone says, well, God exists, the other one says God doesn't exist, and I have the proof and he has the proof as well. So, you know, is God truth? Well, it all comes down back to belief. You can't escape belief. And so the fact that you say, well, there's a truth out there, yeah, you can say that Mother Nature, Father Universe, they know what the truth is. They know what exactly happened. But we don't have access to their file cabinet. So every person, 8 billion people on Earth, we all have different notions of what actually happened. Okay, so we have our beliefs, and that truth becomes a belief after the fact. Okay, so Mother Nature and Father Universe, they know exactly what happens and what is. They know that. You can say they know, okay? But we can only guess. We can only have our beliefs, and we call that belief knowledge because I'm certain of it, I'm convinced of it, but you are not. So we have beliefs. So yeah, even though truth suggests something external, okay, like Mother Nature knows the truth, yeah, but we don't have access to that truth. We only have our version of the truth, our version of the fact is a belief. So all we have is belief. Now this comes back down to belief. And when you look up the word belief, what do you find? Well, something one accepts as true and or real. A firmly held opinion. Sounds quite a bit like knowledge. When you know something, well, you know it. No one's going to take you out of that because you know it. You're certain of it. You know that it happened or that it is. And someone else tries to convince you of the opposite. Says, no, look, that's not what happened. That's not what is. Say, no, but I know it. Means you believe it. When you know, you believe more strongly. That's all. You just believe more strongly what you know. That's all it is. Because when you know, that means you have nothing to learn because you've already learned it. No one can shake you out of your knowledge. Meaning, knowledge is just a stronger belief. That's all it is. Okay, that's what it comes down to. And you look at the synonyms for belief, and it says trust, faith, opinion, conviction, judgment, dogma. Sounds like knowledge. Right? Quite like knowledge. I don't see a difference. But if you do, all you have to do is define the word knowledge, and then maybe we can get the ball rolling here. Because if you think that knowledge is anything other than belief, which is what everyone from Plato to our days, all these people who study knowledge out there, all the philosophers, so-called philosophers, if after 3,000 years they concluded that there's no difference between Plato and what we have today, meaning knowledge is belief, then if you have something different, then your job is to define it in such a way that you can defend it and say, I can show you how knowledge is different than belief. And you have to do that through definitions. Don't give me a long explanation, just define it. And that will do, show me how knowledge is different than belief. Anyways, these are the conclusions we find today, okay, out there. This is from the Wikipedia. Socrates and Theaetetus discuss 3 definitions of knowledge, okay? Knowledge is nothing but perception. It's true judgment and true judgment with an account. And then it summarizes, says, each of these definitions is shown to be unsatisfactory. What does the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, word that they never define, say? The official conclusion of the Theaetetus is that we still do not know how to define knowledge. Okay? So that's out of Plato. They're just analyzing Plato. Let's see if they've done any better since Plato. Okay? And you go out there and this is what you find. Okay? Again, knowledge is familiarity or awareness of someone or something. What does that mean? What is familiarity or awareness? And there is wide agreement among philosophers that it is a form of true belief. What is knowledge? It's belief. Okay, that's after 3,000 years. This is their conclusion. What's dictionary.com say? Knowledge, acquaintance with facts, truths, or principles. Acquaintance, what is it? Known to one. That sounds like belief. Okay, and yeah, there's a summary, familiarity, acquaintance with, being aware. Is that what knowledge is? Because if that's what it is, yeah, it's personal, subjective, and meaning it's belief. We still haven't, gotten out of belief. Here's the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. This is what they say about knowledge, the analysis. says traditional approaches to knowledge have it that knowledge has to do with factors like truth and justification, meaning what? Belief. Okay? Whether knowledge requires safety, sensitivity, reliability, or independence from certain kinds of luck has proven controversial, but something that all these potential conditions on knowledge seem to have in common is that they have some sort of intimate connection with belief. Although it is admittedly difficult to make the relevant connection precise, there is an intuitive sense in which every factor we've examined as a candidate for being relevant to knowledge has something to do with beliefs. So what have we concluded after 3,000 years, after analyzing the Gettier problem and all these other nonsense things that they put in there? Knowledge is belief. Okay? You don't like it because you think knowledge is something different? Define it. Don't tell me that I'm wrong. Don't tell me that I got the wrong references. Define it. Show me that knowledge is not belief. Okay? Remove the word belief or any synonym with belief from your definition. Okay, and this is what Ayn Rand said about knowledge. Okay, we got to touch her as well because she touched the word. Knowledge is a mental grasp. Whoa, she's going to be touching the mind. That's great. She mentally grasps something, whatever that means. I mean, how you know, they use these physical terms to define a concept, an abstract concept such as knowledge. Of a fact of reality. What is a fact? It's belief. Because whatever is a fact of reality is your personal opinion. That's all it is. Reached either by what? Perceptual observation. What is perceived? Opinion. What is observed? Opinion. So, or by a process of reason based on perceptual observation. So, again, all she gave us is the word belief in different ways. She gave us opinion, which is, again, a belief. Recommendations, that's all she did, which is belief. It's all belief. Ayn Rand was not a philosopher. She was not a knower of or a lover of knowledge. All she did was give you recommendations on how to live, on how to do politics, on the best way to run the world. That's it. You know, she was not a philosopher. Philosopher is someone who explains something if it's going to be part of science. And if you say, well, I'm going to study at the university, I'm going to study philosophy, well, what are you going to study? Recommendations? Is that what your major is? Oh, I study recommendations. I study on how to do politics, on how to do what to believe in, you know, religion, etc., opinions. Is that what philosophy is? Just study of nonsense, of opinions? So that's why we need to define the word philosophy. If you're going to go to university and study philosophy, hopefully you're studying something that is scientific, meaning that you explain something. How do we define knowledge here? And this is how we end our philosophy and knowledge segment. And for this, you need to find out what these people have been thinking about all these hundreds of years, thousands of years. What do you think knowledge is? I mean, what is the purpose of knowledge? What are you trying to achieve when you say you know something? How do you prove to someone else that you know something? And I gave the example the other day of, do you know that Napoleon went to Waterloo in 1815? Do you know that Napoleon even existed? Prove it. Prove it. I want you to prove it. What are you going to do? Bring Napoleon here? And even if you did, I'm saying, well, that's in 2022. It's not in 1815 when he went to Waterloo. So that's not the same Napoleon. I mean, I can raise a million arguments against you. You cannot prove the existence of Napoleon in 1815, much less prove to me that Napoleon went to Waterloo. There's no way to prove such a thing. And this goes to the Moonies who believe that, you know, Neil Armstrong did not land on the moon, you know, in 1969. I cannot prove it to you. I cannot bring you Neil Armstrong in 1969 today, the real thing. I can give you a picture, a movie, you know, but not the real thing. I cannot reproduce it and say, look, here it is. Because even then you would say, well, that's not, he did so today, but not in 1969. So even that would fail. There's no way to prove it. Okay, so how do you prove knowledge? How do you show knowledge? What do we mean by knowledge? And again, I clarify that we don't use words like time or knowledge in science. Those words belong exclusively to religion. Okay? We don't use the word time or knowledge in science, but we do define these words to show what the mathematicians and the so-called philosophers meant by these words for the last 3,000 years. Okay, and so here it is. Here's the word knowledge, what we need to figure out about it. Okay, if you want to take it as an action item, if you want to define the word knowledge, here's a hint. Okay, so here we go. The best approach for arriving at a definition of knowledge is to brainstorm the properties we typically associate with this formidable word. Knowledge seems to enjoy three essential features, to wit, what you demonstrate to others. Okay, you take the test, or you go in front of a three-panel judge at the university and say, I'm going to show you my knowledge. I'm going to prove to you my knowledge. I want to show you how much I know, right? Well, you demonstrate it to someone else. That's how you prove that you know, you regurgitate what you know, okay? That's one issue. Then in a single experiment, okay, because if I talk about, Napoleon, that's not knowledge. That's just, I'm regurgitating something I memorized. Is that knowledge? Do you know that Napoleon existed? Do you know that Napoleon went to Waterloo? No, so you cannot do that. But what I can show you, for example, is an experiment and do it in front of you and say, look, I know what's going to happen. And here it is. I let go of my pencil and I say, I know, right? I know that it's going to fall to the floor. So I let go of it, it falls to the floor, and I proved my knowledge, right? So not only do I demonstrate my knowledge, but I'm also going to run an experiment to show that I know what's going to happen, okay? And in the future as opposed to the past. I cannot know the past because then I cannot reproduce it. And again, this goes to the Moonies, people who don't believe we landed on the moon. Why? Because there's no way I can show you anything that happened before today. I can't prove to you, I cannot know it, I cannot demonstrate it to you, because whatever happened, the best I can show you is a movie. And even that you're going to question and say, well, that was done in Hollywood or whatever. So it's got to be the future. Knowledge has to do only with the future. You can't know anything of the past. You can only know something of the future. Like God, the block universe, he knows what's going to happen in the future because he's all-knowing, he's omniscient, right? So he knows exactly what's going to happen in the future. To you, to anybody, right? Supposedly, right? So we have the three criteria there. What you demonstrate to others in a single experiment, and the future as opposed to the past. Okay? The way you demonstrate knowledge is to someone is by predicting what is going to happen in a specific experiment. And so here we have the definition, okay? It was from Why God Doesn't Exist, my book. It says, knowledge, the ability to predict the outcome of a specific experiment precisely. Okay? Ability to predict the outcome of a specific experiment precisely. That's what knowledge has meant all these years. Is there such a thing as knowledge? The answer is no. There is no monster as knowledge. Not even God has knowledge. He's not omniscient. Okay? Why? Because, very simple. You say, well, Bill, you let go of the pencil and it fell to the floor and you predicted, and you can predict it precisely. Okay, so I do the experiment and it falls to the floor. Say, do it again, Bill. I don't believe you. Okay, so I do it again. Repeatable experiment. And I keep doing that and I say, okay, see, I proved it to you. I proved my knowledge. Do it again, Bill. Okay, so I said one more time. I let go of the pencil and it stays up in the air. And you say, whoa, I thought you predicted it was going to fall. It turns out that it did not fall. It stayed in the air. It turns out that you did not know that I had two magnets and that pencil had, a metal bar in it instead of a lead, piece. And so I held it up in the air with two magnets, which you did not know. You knew that horse is going to win the race. You knew for a fact because the others were so rotten, so bad, And you voted on horse number 5. I voted on horse number 10, but he says, there's no way number 10 will win because it's the worst horse in the lot, and he's got a crooked leg, and there's no way that horse is going to make it. What you did not know is that I had a gun and I killed all the other horses, and the only one that crossed the finish line was my horse. Okay, so you cannot predict the future exactly because we do not know everything. And because we do not know everything, there is no such thing as knowledge, which is to predict the future, the results of an experiment exactly without error. That's what we mean by the word knowledge. There is no such thing as knowledge. Let's get down to the questions that we had since last. Oh no, let me go with the Moonies here. Hold it. We had some Moonies, and so I'm going to cover them a little bit here. Yeah, here's the first one. Fellow says, Challenger accident with the names of the twins. Yes, twins, just look them up. He's saying that some people survived the Challenger, that they're still around, alive, and I showed, I think, a picture of that last time. It looks like this, and they show some of these people, same names, being older, and they say, hold it, these people exist still, so that Challenger was a hoax by the government. And why do you believe this? Is the question I've got. Why do you believe this, what you see there? People, they want to doubt the government. They said, I've been burned by the government so many times. There's so many conspiracies, so many false flags. But then they believe this, and they don't question that. They say, oh, look, yeah, it's the same person. Why do you believe that? Where did you get that? Someone could be playing a hoax on you. Maybe it's the CIA for the same government. Another fellow mentions this astronaut, Ed Mitchell, and he's the 6th astronaut to walk on the moon. This fellow believes that E.T. visited us. There have been crashed craft, okay? There have been material and bodies recovered. And he was referring to Roswell, okay, in New Mexico, where there was some time back, couple decades ago, they said they found an unidentified flying object, and then they showed these pictures. They have them in a museum over there in Roswell, where they see this ET, and and people go and see this, and they go, ooh, and one of these is this fellow Ed Mitchell. The fact that he's an astronaut doesn't mean that he knows anything or that he can prove any of this. He's got an opinion, and he's giving you his opinion that, the government is hiding a lot of this stuff in secret places, and that the ETs actually visited us, and there was a crash of a craft. And that's just his opinion. And the important thing is that NASA distanced itself from Ed Mitchell and said that that was his personal opinion, that they don't agree with what he's saying. So again, the fact that someone important, you can have a president think that ETs are for real, it's his opinion, nothing but. Okay, here we hold another thing, that you cannot travel interstellarly. It's impossible for any living entity to travel to another star. Okay, just that simple. Okay, so you have to look through my site, look the Pioneer anomaly video, and it'll explain why we cannot travel to another star. We never will. I don't even think we're going to colonize some object in the solar system like Mars or the moon. I doubt that's going to happen. We can probably somehow put some hut out there with lights, with all the things there, and live. A few astronauts, maybe 10 astronauts, can live in there. That might happen. I doubt it very much. But we're not going to evacuate the Earth. We're not going to colonize Mars or the moon. None of that is ever going to happen. So forget about colonization. That part of the budget of NASA that goes to that, if it develops some new technology, more power to them. But to say that we're actually going to colonize the moon and Mars and live there and so on, absolute nonsense. Never going to happen. Okay? Okay, another fellow says, Neil Armstrong stepped on Mars. You can't prove that Neil Armstrong did not step on Mars. This is the line of argument you are using. What can I say, okay? Again, I can't reproduce Napoleon. I cannot reproduce Neil Armstrong stepping on the moon in 1969 again. I cannot reproduce that incident because even if I did, you would not believe it and say that was done in Hollywood, etc., etc. So there's no way to prove anything from the past. You cannot prove history. You cannot prove that Caesar existed or that he went to London, to England. So you're looking for something that's impossible. You cannot prove the past. You can make an assumption. People say believe. You don't really believe. You make an assumption. You take some things for granted. We take for granted that Napoleon was a man that lived 200 years ago and he did all this stuff. And why do we accept that? Well, because it was passed on from generation to generation. There's no reason not to accept it, okay? But again, you have to take that with a grain of salt because you might accept that Napoleon was there, but do you accept that he ate 5 times a day? Someone might have theorized that and say, I think Napoleon every day, for whatever reason, he ate 5 times a day. He can come up with anything. And you say, do you believe that now? Do you accept that? And so it's how much you want to accept from the past. Now you can make an assumption, about the existence and what Caesar did. You make that assumption based on what you read, what our forefathers passed down to us. But you cannot reproduce Caesar going to England. You cannot reproduce Napoleon going to Waterloo. You can't reproduce that. You just have to accept it on face value, and that's it. There's no more than that. And same with the moon landings, Okay, here's another fellow, and he says, is it even possible to see an object 350 feet long from 250 miles away? Okay, he's talking about the ISS, the International Space Station. Can you get your binoculars? Can you get your telescope and see it out there when it goes around the Earth? Remember, NASA has the schedule for when it goes through what countries, up there. And this thing passes 15 times a day, about an hour, every hour and a half through the same regions, okay? So it goes around, quite fast. And the question is, can you see it, he said. Does the human eye even have the resolving power? I doubt an aircraft carrier could be seen from 100 miles away. Okay, and so this is a shot of the moon through a pair of binoculars someone took. The moon is a little bigger, obviously, than the ISS, but it's a lot farther away. And yet there's a shot through a pair of binoculars. This is more or less what you would see if you get your binoculars and focus it on the moon. You would see something similar to that. And you say, how is it possible to see something so far away? Well, we've invented telescopes and microscopes and binoculars and so on. That's what we used to see far away. And what can I say? Just prove it to yourself. Get a pair of binoculars and see if you can see the ISS. Don't question whether you can see it. Try to see it and then say, yeah, I can see it. Obviously, you'd be answering your own question there. So again, I don't know. Some of these people should just do it. Grab a pair of binoculars, go out there. Don't keep questioning. Can you see it? Well, do it, and you'll find out if you can see it. That way you don't, because if I say, yes, you can see it, you'll say, well, I don't believe you, Bill. And so what have we done? We haven't learned anything, neither you nor I. So what you got to do is do it yourself, okay? This is something you can prove to yourself. That's why I say the ISS is a good way of handling the moon landings, not because you're going to believe in the moon landings, but because if you can see the ISS up there and you are convinced and you finally covered that base and say, okay, the ISS is out there, it is rolling around the Earth, it is a monster, it's a device, it's not a hologram, as one guy said there, or some pair of lights or whatever. No, you see it going around and you say, okay, it's there. I verified it for myself. And no one told me about it. The CIA is not trying to do a false flag or trying to convince me. No, I saw it with my own eyes. If you cover that base, then the next step is very simple. How did that thing get up there? Did they do that in one shot? Or did they take several rockets? Or did they take several projects first before they could build that thing up there? And that's when you start pulling on the little string that takes you to the center of the labyrinth. Okay, that's the way it works. Okay, someone says along the same line, even if you would see something resemble the ISS in the sky, then you would need to prove that it is a space station and not something else. Again, if you can't tell the difference between, an object up there, then maybe you have to get a more powerful telescope, microscope, binocular, pair of lenses, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, detective eyeglass. You just get a powerful one and convince yourself that that thing that's out there is, a big field, like a football field size object that's rolling around the earth. And once you convince yourself of that, you've got half the battle won, 90% of the battle won, because now you say, okay, they went through all these steps to get that thing up there. That means they did run all these experiments, these projects, where they sent things into space, among them Gagarin and Tereshkova and Laika and all these other things that they sent up there. And yeah, why not? Rockets to the moon, with or without people. I mean, why don't you think that we could send a rocket to the moon? You don't think that's possible? And yeah, I mean, what can I say? I mean, if you're a flat earther, I can see why you would not want to believe that, because you say, well, if we can send something out there, we could have taken a picture of the earth and we know it's round. And that would destroy their theory, so they go with second best. They say, we never sent anything out there. Okay, so I can understand why they have a reason not to believe. If you're an intelligent person, and you believe that the moon landings did not happen simply because you've been fooled so much by the government and by conspiracies and so on, well, just verify what you can verify, which is the ISS. Okay? Okay, now, yeah, let's go with some of the questions here, and let's go with a couple of these. Fellow says, does nothing exist? If yes, then it isn't nothing. If no, then how do you know that lack of something is nothing? Well, the way we do all these things is not verification, not with proofs, not with an experiment. What we do is define. In science, we begin with definitions. And as long as you follow the definitions, I promise not to hurt you, okay? Okay, so here it is. In order to know, right, whether lack of something is nothing, in science we define the words that make or break our argument. See how easy it was all these years? All you have to do is define. And so we define these words: exist, physical presence, meaning something plus location. Yeah, we got the something now. What is something? That which has shape. And what is nothing? That which doesn't have shape. So now we have definitions, right? Now we're going to use these definitions. And you cannot deviate one iota from these definitions. You cannot take a single letter away from these definitions. You must follow them. You may not like them, but you must follow them. If you don't like them, you have to come up with your own mousetrap. You got to say, I got a better mousetrap, Bill. Okay, get inside the ring, fight for your definition. Otherwise, these stay, and we're going to work with these definitions, and we're going to apply them to your question. Does nothing exist? Well, pursuant to the definition of exist that you see there, nothing can't and doesn't exist. Why? Because nothing is a concept. Only things are those that have shape. Nothing doesn't have shape, so it doesn't qualify for existence, because existence requires a something, which is that which has shape, which nothing doesn't have. Okay? And then the issue has nothing to do with knowledge. So don't tell me how you know, because existence is not a question of knowledge. Okay? There is no provision in the definition of existence for knowledge, but you try to figure it out. It's something plus location. Where's knowledge? There's no room for knowledge in there. Okay, so that's how we do it in science. We just work off of definitions so that we know what we're saying. Okay, we understand what we're saying. Okay, a more interesting subject here coming up. Fellow says, your definitional framework for the foundation of physics. You want to exclude physical law, experiment, and measurement? In that framework, how do you define, right, your claim that water forms globular shapes in space? Okay, more or less along line of reasoning of flat earthers. First, try to prove, okay, that a space vacuum can even exist. We just proved that it can't exist because vacuum, space are synonyms, by the way. Vacuum, space, and nothing, all three are synonyms. And they're concepts because an object is that which has shape, so we don't have to worry about existence there, okay? And so notice, space, vacuum, nothing do not exist because concepts do not exist. Only objects may be said to exist. And nothing is that which doesn't have shape, which is what an object is, that which has shape. Okay, how can we have a pressurized system next to a space vacuum without some sort of container? So let's get the first issues there. The fact that he says physical law, experiment, and measurement. Okay, let's address those first because this poor fellow is so lost he doesn't even know who he is, who his mother is. So no such monster as physical law, not in science. Science, we don't deal with laws. And there's no such thing as a physical law. The word law was introduced by the mathematicians. In science, we say science is about rational explanation, and science is not about experiments or about measurements. Okay, we don't deal with experiments or measurements. Those belong exclusively to mathematical physics. So here we have in this site, we do something different than mathematical physics. In science, we don't prove. And in science, concepts do not exist. Space is nothing, which is a concept. Therefore, it's irrational to say that nothing exists. Okay, so I hope we covered that base. What do we propose instead? Well, we propose something different to answer his last issue there. How can we have a pressurized system next to a space vacuum without some sort of a container? This is the issue that has the flat earthers up at nights, okay? They can't sleep because of this. So let's begin slowly. Let's see if we can take them by the hand, step by step, where their reasoning fails, okay? Flat earthers and all the people who say, how can you curve water, essentially, right? That's the issue. Okay, well, let's start slowly, okay? We'll go slowly, and here it is. Mathematical physics proposes discrete particles. There's no relation between any particles. There's space to say that exists between particles. In other words, particles are not touching each other. They're all separated. Okay, this is what mathematical physics has. This is what we have had for the last 3,000 years. That's why they cannot explain gravity. They cannot explain magnetism. They cannot explain light or the workings of the atom because they work with discrete particles. Anyone working with particles should be kicked out of science because if in 3,000 years you haven't figured out that you cannot do physics, the invisible stuff, intangible stuff that Mother Nature does every day like gravity and magnetism, if you haven't realized in 3,000 years that you can't do it with discrete particles, then you got a mental problem. Okay, so this is the way we look at it. What do we propose instead? We propose that all atoms in the universe are physically interconnected. Physically interconnected. Something is connecting every atom in the universe. I hope you see the difference. Right now I'm just telling you what we propose here so that you can understand the answer to the question that was asked, okay? Which is, how do you curve water? That's what we're getting to, okay? So first we have to separate mathematical physics, discrete particles, from the rope model, which is all atoms are physically interconnected, okay? That's where we start. We don't ask that you believe, we ask that you take this as an assumption. We're going to make this assumption, okay? Hopefully we've got this under our skin now, okay? Okay, so let's remove this. Give me a second here. Okay, so we're saying that all atoms are physically interconnected. We got that so far? I hope I didn't lose any person out there. This is kindergarten stuff, okay? Okay, so what do we propose? We propose that why does the Earth go around the sun? Again, we're proposing this here. It doesn't mean you have to believe us, okay? We're saying, what are we proposing? We're saying, why does the Earth go around the sun? Well, you just saw that all atoms are physically interconnected. That means that every atom of the Earth, including every atom of you, is connected to every atom of the sun, which is connected to every atom of the moon. Every atom in your body is connected to every atom of my body right through the Earth. That's the proposal. That's the assumption. Okay? Understand the assumption. We're not asking you to believe. We're asking you to make believe, right, that it is true, that that's what's out there, that all atoms are physically interconnected. Okay? That's where we start. So how do we explain the orbit of the Earth around the sun according to this model? Okay? Let's get all this right. We're saying that if every atom is interconnected, the sun twirls the Earth around itself, and the Earth twirls the moon around itself. Okay? And here you see the Earth orbit. Okay? Because every atom of the Earth is bound to every atom of the sun. What is space? Nothing. There's no friction with nothing, because nothing is that which has no shape. There is no thing called space. So there is no friction, and therefore the Earth can roll around forever because the sun is twirling it by the electromagnetic ropes, which is what we're saying interconnects any two atoms. So all atoms of the Earth are connected to every single atom of the sun. The sun twirls the Earth around through these mediators that we cannot see or touch. Okay? And that's why the Earth rolls around the sun and doesn't lose speed, because it doesn't have any friction with space. The Earth does the same thing to the moon. Okay, so every atom of the moon is bound to every atom of the Earth, including you. So every atom of your body is bound to every atom of the moon. That's why you can see the moon, because light propagates along that mediator all the way to your eye. Otherwise, you would not see the moon. The reason you see the moon, you see it through the electromagnetic ropes that interconnect every atom of the moon to every atom in your eye. Okay? We got it so far? Do you believe in it? We don't care. We don't care if you believe. We're asking you to make believe. You have to concede the assumption to understand the theory founded upon that assumption. Okay, do we have that straight? Okay, so we're going to make an assumption that all atoms in the universe are physically interconnected. We're saying that every atom of the Earth is bound to every atom of the sun. The sun twirls the Earth around more or less like I'm going to twirl this ball. There is a physical connection. I only have one here. Okay, I can't make the gazillions of atoms that are bound from the ball to my finger, but this is what happens. This is how the sun twirls the Earth around. And we do the same thing to the moon. That's the mechanism we're proposing. We're saying that the reason people missed this throughout all these years is that they thought an object, that a thing, an entity, was that which you can see or touch. And that's where the irrationality started. We're saying that a thing is not that which you can see or touch. It's that which has shape. And not all objects we can see or touch, among them the air. Hopefully the air is something, and we cannot see the air. We can touch it, but we can't see it. And there are other things that we cannot even see or touch. Okay? But anyways, so now we get to this issue. So far, I hope you understood that much. Okay, now we get to the issue of water curving around the Earth. Okay, so we're going to show you a little video, a little quick video of what causes the mechanism of how water, not only water, but air as well, curves around the spherical, more or less spherical Earth. Okay, that's what we're going to show now. We're going to show you a movie. So we can keep our mouth shut if we wanted to, but we're going to give you a little explanation in the background so that you know what you're staring at, okay? But I think it'll be self-evident once you see it. Okay, here it goes, okay? Very slowly for all of you. Okay, let me put it over here. Okay, here you have the Earth. And the dark blue is the ocean. The oceans, we divided them into oceans, but they're all really connected. It's like we have a single ocean on Earth, no problem, either way that you want to see it. The dark blue are the oceans, and you can see it's a 2D version, but you have to imagine that as a globe, as a spherical type of object, the Earth. Okay, and the water is curved around that Earth. That's what we're proposing. Okay, why? Because every atom of the water, every atom that forms the ocean, every single atom is bound to every other atom of the Earth, including to parts of the ocean that are on the other side of the planet. Okay? So we have this atom is connected to the one on the other side of the atom. And the other atom here is connected to the other side of, to an atom on the other side of the atom of the Earth. Okay? And if you put all these together, well, you end up with a sphere. Okay? That's what you end up with. Why? Because they're all tending towards the center. That's what gravity is, and mass. What it is essentially everything tending towards the center. Everything's being drawn towards the center, and that creates a spherical object. And that's why almost every object in the universe is spherical. Why are they spherical? Well, the Earth, we say here, was a star. Used to be a sun. Okay? It was a star. That's how you can create a spherical object such as the Earth. Okay? Because every star, because of its great gravity, because everything's tending towards the center of that object, forms this spherical surface that eventually compresses little by little by little by little, okay, and eventually creates the elements by fusing them together. So you have the heavier elements. You take hydrogen and helium and you compress them all the way to iron and higher elements. That's what we're doing. That's what the Earth is. Earth is made that way. That's why we're saying the Earth used to be a sun, used to be a star. That was compressed into this cinder known as a black dwarf. That's what the Earth is. And then, as you can see, not only do the elements go from heavier in the center of the Earth to lighter on the outside, all the way to gases, which is what the air is that's covering our planet. Gases such as nitrogen and oxygen and so on. Okay, but what's the issue? Now you have the air. Why does the air stay? I mean, there's no container. There's nothing on the outside of air, nothing on the outside of water, except space, which we said is nothing. It's not a container because it's not a thing. It doesn't have shape. So why does all this stay and curve around the spherical Earth? Well, again, there we see little atom that I'm showing, little red one there. Here is over there. Now you see it on the bottom. On the side, sorry. And now you'll see it on the bottom. Okay? Where are they being tugged towards? Well, they're all tugged eventually towards the center of the Earth. That's why the air does not leave our planet. That's why the further the air is, the lighter it is. There's fewer and fewer atoms further out. And the farther away it is, the less pull it has towards the center of the Earth. And at some point, there is no air. And you get into absolute space where maybe you find an atom here and there, maybe, you know. But the issue is that explains why the Earth is spherical, why water curves around the Earth, why air curves around the spherical Earth. Because all atoms are physically interconnected. Do you believe it? We don't care. Do you accept it? We don't care. We explain to you so that you understand the mechanism, okay? And the cause. And once you understand that, you reach your own conclusion. Whether you believe it or not is your personal opinion, and good luck with that. You know, we don't care. That's religion. We're talking about physics. We're trying to explain cause, mechanism, and we explained it there. We're saying all atoms are physically interconnected. That leads to spherical objects, celestial objects, and which leads, in the case of the Earth and some other planets, with a gaseous surface that is also connected to a more solid, usually, interior of that object. Okay? But here, let me show you another one, because you say, okay, that's gravity. What if I have just a drop of, like, you know, here, these people have this notion that, you know, that water is only level. Let's see if I can level like that, you know. It's level. Why? Because what happens is that here we're relying on gravity. And if it weren't for the glass, this thing wouldn't have a level surface. It would not be flat, you know. And so they say, well, this is my experience. This is the experience these people have, the flat earthers. And so they say, you know, show me that you can curve that. Well, yeah, you won't do it with your rubber ducky in your bathtub, okay? You won't see light water curving in your bathtub because you don't have the mass in the water to do what I just showed you with the Earth, the oceans of the Earth and the gases, air, you know, that cover the Earth, okay? But let me show you something that you can visualize, Okay, we're talking about visualization so that you understand. That's what we're talking about here. We're not asking you to believe. We're asking you to understand. You reach your own conclusion. Okay, so here it goes. Very easy. We have an astronaut, and he releases water into space. Okay, maybe a bucket of water, so he just throws the water out there without the baby. Okay, so he throws water out there. He throws a blob of water. It is in no container whatsoever. Okay, all we have is a blob of water. There's no container because space is not a container. Space is nothing, that which has no shape, so it doesn't qualify as a container. He's going to release a bundle of water. Okay, and here it is. Okay, and does that thing have shape? Does that water have shape? That drop of water. It could be a drop of water, it could be a bucket of water. It's water or some kind of liquid. We don't care. The point here is, does that thing have shape? And you say, well, I don't know. Okay, so let's stop it. Okay, there it is. Okay, what you're staring at, we took a snapshot of that. Does that have shape? Does it have a container? And yeah, it has shape, but it has no container, and it's a liquid, some kind of liquid. Okay, and so the issue here is, yes, you can have shape of water without a container. You do not need a container to curve water. And you can see the water is kind of curved there, isn't it? Okay, and we did it without putting it in a container. Okay, so we're just trying to make you understand. We're not trying to convince you or for you to believe. You believe whatever you want. All I'm saying is we have mechanisms. And the mechanism is, the first one is that all atoms are physically interconnected. That pulls everything towards the center. That explains why all celestial objects are spherical. You know, not perfectly spherical, but they are spheroids and whatever, you know, spherical-like. And it also explains why water and liquids and gases also curve around those objects. You know, you have Jupiter, it's just a bunch of gases. You have Mars, for those of you who believe this, you know, Mars is a planet that has CO2, so does Venus, that has CO2 around it. You say, why doesn't that CO2 fly away? It's a gas, isn't it? And gases tend to expand. Well, not there, not out there, because the gravity, in other words, the ropes to which each atom is attached, does not allow it to leave the planet. That's why gases form an envelope around these planets. Okay, now we do have a true, genuine flat earther, and he's the guy who went out there and actually looked at this, so he has a question. Okay, so finally I had someone who actually goes out there and tries to understand what I'm saying when I'm saying, you know, that water and air can curve around the earth. Okay, so here's his question. He says, where's the mechanism for the observation of gravity? How does this mechanism work? Okay, how is it able to hold massive standing bodies of water onto a globe so that the water is not level but instead rotund? In other words, he's referring again to this. This is his experience that, you know, water just falls because of gravity, right? And leaves a flat surface. Okay, so this is his experience. So he hasn't evolved beyond this. This is the issue. So this is what he bases his experience on, and this is the only thing he regurgitates. Okay, reality demonstrates the physics of water. Okay, again, he's talking about this case only. That alone is enough to know it's not a globe. Okay, would love to get a response on this. Okay, and show some real-world physics of standing bodies of water with a curved surface. So I showed him the same thing that I just showed for this other fellow. Here it is, okay? That every atom is connected, physically connected to every atom on Earth. So it's pulled in that direction, okay? So everything pulls towards the center of the Earth. And that explains why water curves around the round dish Earth. And air, you know, encapsulates the spherical Earth. What does this fellow say? Okay, he follows up and he says, finally he understood it. Imaginary fantasy mathematical ropes. I don't know where he got the mathematical part because this has nothing to do with mathematics. They said, where are these ropes, Bill? Okay, that's now that he understood it, now he's going to question where the ropes are. But at least I think he understood the mechanism. I think he did. You know, I can't say for sure, okay? But he apparently now at least understands the mechanism. Now he's questioning whether they exist. Where are they? Why can't I see or touch these ropes? That's what he's talking about. See, all these people are looking for an experiment. They want you to prove through some kind of evidence, meaning experiment, meaning see, touch, right? That the ropes are binding any two atoms. Now, we can't see an atom, one atom. You can't see any atom, not even the uranium atom. You cannot see it. You would have to go to a microscope or even a high-powered microscope such as a SEM or an atomic force microscope. Then you might see not the individual atom with the little electron rolling around. That you won't see. What you'll see is a bird's eye view of something which is roundish, which again shows that an atom is really more like what we say a membrane that encapsulates a proton star, and not what quantum mechanics says, which is a little bead that's rolling around. Because that's not what we see. We do not see a little bead rolling around when we look through the SEM, and I did work with SEMs, by the way, and or an atomic force microscope. That's not what you would see. You do not see a little ball rolling around. What you see is a membrane. Okay, you see a ball. Okay, so we're saying that all atoms are interconnected. You can't see an atom, but he wants to see the ropes that interconnect two atoms, which we can't see. He wants to be able to touch them. And so he says, where are these ropes? And again, these people are looking for proof. We're not here for proof. First of all, you cannot prove anything that's invisible, intangible. We cannot prove anything that's invisible, intangible. I cannot bring it to you and show it to you because it's invisible, intangible. Okay? So what do? Well, we do the spoon experiment to show why their logic fails. Okay? I let go of a spoon, okay? Here we have a spoon. Little spoon, okay? I let go of a spoon. And we all know, we don't believe, we know, right? That it's got to fall downwards to the floor, okay? We do this experiment every day. Real world physics. Real world physics. You let go of the spoon, it falls to the floor, okay? We know this. We have the experience with it. Now here's the $1,000,000 question. Please listen carefully. Can you see or touch anything above or below the spoon other than the air? Is there something else here that you can see or touch other than the air? And of course, if you went out into space and there's no atoms out there, you're completely between two galaxies, completely in the middle of a space, nothing there, and you do the experiment again, you won't find anything above or below. There's not even going to be any air in here, okay? So the question is, here you have a spoon. You let go of it, it falls to the floor. There's nothing above it, nothing below it. Is there nothing here? Is there something here or nothing here? If you say there isn't, because you can't see or touch it, because it's invisible, intangible, you are going to do this experiment. You're going to explain this experiment with black magic. You're invoking black magic. You can't use a concept such as density. You can't use the word gravity. Whatever word you use, it better not be a concept. You need a physical object to say that this came down. It's like saying you pulled on the horse and the horse came towards you. But you use no rope, you use no elongated object such as a rope or a wire or a cable or anything like that. You just went like this and the horse came towards you. So how do you explain that? Well, if you explain it without an elongated object between your hands and the horse, you're using black magic. You did it by magic. You have no explanation for how that horse came towards you. And the same thing here. If I let go of the spoon, and you're saying there's nothing here above or below it, no particles pushing, no ropes pulling, then you're doing black magic. You're saying that this fell down because of black magic. Same thing here. And when you say this is level, why and I'm sure that if I break the glass or turn it upside down, that water's going to fall to the floor. That's our experience. Why does that water fall to the floor? What's pulling on it? What's pushing on it? Please identify the invisible, intangible object that is pulling or pushing on the water. And if you say there's no object because I cannot see or touch it, you're going to do your explanation with black magic. So you have a choice. You either go with the ropes or you go with black magic. If you have a third option, could be particles, whatever. But if you have another option, please let me know, okay? Let me know how you're going to explain why that water is level, and don't use any concepts. We need physical objects. We need an object that we can that you can illustrate. So you need to do a lot of pictures, okay? And so here, this is how we explain why, what causes the spoon to fall to the floor. Here it is, okay? All atoms of the spoon are connected to every atom on Earth. Every atom of the floor, every atom, all the way to the center of the Earth and to the other side. So I haven't drawn the gazillions of ropes that connect every atom of the spoon to every atom on Earth. You have to imagine that. What we're saying is the reason the spoon falls is the ropes that connect every atom are fanning out. They open up, right? And you have more and more individual ropes that are not aligned that are essentially causing this acceleration to happen. That's our explanation. You don't have to believe it. We don't care if you believe it or not. We're giving you an explanation of why the spoon, what causes the spoon to fall to the floor. If you say there's nothing there between the spoon and the floor, you are doing it with black magic. Okay, so your job is to explain gravity. Why, what causes the spoon to fall to the floor. Hopefully you're using objects, you're using things, you're not using abstract concepts such as mass, force, field, wave, any of those. You can't use concepts. You have to use a physical object. Physical object, that which has shape. Okay? You don't like my definition? Bring a better mousetrap. Defend your definition first before you even begin to talk. Okay, another fellow says, he puts these words that I'm saying this, okay, and he's right, this is what I'm saying. That math, geometry doesn't belong in science physics when it's a primary tool in these fields. No, science is rational explanations. We do not use math, geometry at all. We have no use for math or geometry because math and geometry, meaning, essentially the relations that we see in geometric figures, those are just concepts and they only describe. And science, we explain. Physics, rational explanations of phenomena, of mechanism, philosophy, of purposes and reasons. And if you don't like my definitions, you cannot use the fallacy of authority, democracy, or tradition. Okay? Another fellow says, give me a second here. Got it here. Okay, another fellow says this. He accuses me, I think it's the same fellow. He says, belief that only objects or concepts, that there are only objects or concepts when space, motion, collisions are neither. Well, you have to define the word concept in order to say that. See, you can't just say that motion, collisions, space are neither concepts or objects. We don't know what you're talking about. Until you define the word concept, we won't know, okay? And, and then you got to show why space, motion, and collision are not concepts, and what are they instead? Well, what category do they fall under, okay, of types of words? There's only two categories according to this site, and that's concepts and objects. Every word in the dictionary can be divided between those two. One is that which has shape, the other one that which doesn't have shape, essentially. Okay, that's the concept. And so you either are a concept or you're an object. And again, a word that invokes or embodies two objects or two words treated as objects. That's what a concept is. Okay, so we do have a definition. We work off of definitions. You don't like it? Come up with a better definition. Don't use the one in the dictionary. For sure, it's wrong. It's irrational. Okay, fellow says, a circle is an object. Yes. That which has shape. Yes. That's what an object is. It exists because it has physical presence. Object plus location. No, a circle does not have location. The paper, maybe the ink, the chalk, the board, those have location, not the circle. Okay, so no, you failed on the last one. 2 out of 3 ain't so bad anyways, okay. So, fellow says, in regards to your electromagnetic thread, single thread, right? How can a single indivisible entity bend? Okay? Isn't the state of something bending, doesn't it imply a relationship of multiple entities? In other words, he's saying that if it's a single thread made of a single piece, how does it bend? Because we associate bending with lots, with many constituents, many parts, and then you can imagine something bending. But if it's made of a single piece, you would think it's rigid. That's what he's saying here. Okay, so he wants to understand that. Okay, and what we do in science is we make assumptions, and these are the assumptions we make for the thread. Okay, people say, I don't believe you, I don't accept these. That's fine. You accept whatever you want. We make these assumptions in order to explain how our universe works. Okay, so these are the assumptions we make for the thread. Okay, here it goes. Single thread. Okay, there's only one thread in the entire universe, converts into all these atoms and the ropes that interconnect them. There's a single closed loop thread floating in space, if you can say in space, meaning it's just floating in nothingness, okay? Within nothingness, whatever you want to use as words. It's made of a single piece, okay? It's unbreakable. You cannot break it, okay? You cannot tear it. You cannot cut it, okay? So it's made of a single piece, okay? It's like Wonder Woman's lasso, okay, rope, okay? So it's made of a single piece. It doesn't break, okay? There's a single thread, makes up all the matter in the universe. It's flexible, which is his problem with the assumptions, okay? It's invisible, you can't see it. It's intangible, doesn't understand what visibility and intangibility is. Those are things of our macro world, those are phenomena of our macro world, okay? The thread is flexible, but it's made of a single piece. That's where he's got, in his mind, a contradiction, okay? And it also goes through itself, even though you can't cut it. It doesn't cut itself, okay? So we have these assumptions. You say, man, those are all magical assumptions, Bill. Yeah, in our everyday macro world, these are irrational assumptions. These are extraordinary assumptions. First thing you have to understand is that when you're going to deal with gravity, when you're going to be dealing with light, with the workings of the atoms, with magnetism, right? You're dealing with something extraordinary that we don't have in our everyday world. Why? Because here you see, again, my two magnets, okay, two little magnets, and they attract each other. And there's nothing in between. And there's nothing pushing from the outside because you can feel the pull from the inside. Okay, so one's pulling on the other. You can do the experiment on your own at home, but you'll feel that there's already a tug from the inside. It's not from the outside. But there's nothing in between here, nothing you can see or touch. So is there nothing between these two magnets? If you say nothing, you're doing black magic. And if you say something is there, like Mr. Maxwell said, and like Mr. Faraday said, there is something there, some exotic type of matter, then hopefully it's invisible and intangible. Okay? So you can't see it, you can't touch it, there's something there, it's invisible and intangible. That's the first conclusion. That's a rational conclusion. So if I can bring something to you and say, this is what's in there, and I show it to you and you can touch it, I'm not representing the actual world of Mother Nature, because Mother Nature's world is that it's invisible and intangible, meaning I cannot bring it to you and show it to you other than as a concept, in this case, the rope. Okay, I can say this is what it looks like in that world that we can't see or touch. Okay, this is the architecture that that thing has, because a thing is that which has shape, not that which you can see or touch. And then you're saying, well, how can it be made of a single piece and flexible? Again, you're deriving this from your experience of everyday stuff. And it turns out that we see examples of this in our everyday world. You know, you take a solid, you take a steel beam, and you can't run it through another steel beam. They kind of clash, they hit each other and push each other away. You can't get them to melt into another unless you change again, heat it up, melt it, then maybe you could do it. But steel beam, we usually can't pass them through each other. And here, I'll do it with steel beam with something a little less heavy, 2 pencils. And they don't seem to go through each other. If it's solid, it's very hard to get something to go through each other. Okay, but now try it with water. In fact, you have water, okay? And you can see this, which is solid, right? Goes right through the water. Okay, you can see how it goes. Let's see, maybe there. So it goes right through the water. And you say, how did that happen? How did I get something solid to go through a liquid? In fact, this already went through the air, through the gas. It's going right through it. And you say, hold it, how can some atoms go through some other atoms? It's unheard of, right? And we see it every day. Every day we see pencils going through the air, right? Or through liquids. And so this notion that you have that that something which is made of a single piece is also flexible or goes through each other, well, you have to understand that these are properties that we inherited from the thread. The thread has these properties, and we have these properties in our everyday world that we take for granted. We say, well, we know a solid doesn't go through a solid, but a solid goes through a gas and goes through a liquid, and we don't have a problem with that. Where did we get these properties? Well, maybe we got them from the thread. Maybe the thread, this single thread that makes up every bit of matter in the universe, has some of these properties, and that's why the atoms, depending on how they're arranged, and how much heat there is, how much cold there is, well, then they have these properties. Where did they inherit these properties? From the mother, from the single thread. So I don't think these properties, these attributes, these assumptions are off the wall. We have to explain the real world out there. The real world is that we cannot see the mediators of gravity and magnetism. We cannot smell them, we cannot touch them, okay? So there is something there, but we cannot see or touch it, meaning that's not the definition of an object. The definition of an object is that which has shape. We're saying it has the shape of a rope that interconnects two atoms. And why do we say that? Because with that assumption, we can explain light and gravity. That's why we make that assumption. It's a very useful, handy assumption to explain light and gravity. And so it's something we can't prove to you. We can't bring the actual rope that Mother Nature has out there. We can only say, look, this is what we think is out there, and so that you can understand the mechanism. What properties does it have? Well, it has all these properties that you see in our everyday world, which is solid can't go through solid, but solid can go through gas and water and liquid. Okay, so this is the way you have to look at it. Anyways, with that, I'll see you next Sunday, and hopefully we'll continue with some of these subjects. We'll see you then.